We lived in like a castle, empty rooms. Every room or 2 rooms had a fireplace. And we lived there 3 or 4 days. And we lived on our sleeping bags. There was no furniture and everything. After a few days, we got onto a journey. We got onto our trucks.
We went on a journey. What kind of we got on a journey?
We went on a journey. We got on our trucks and we headed traveling. Where were we going? You had all kinds of rumors. North, south, east, west. Nobody knew where we were going. Eventually we got on trains and it took us through Strasbourg, which is Strasbourg was on the border between Germany and France. And during all this period that I was in Europe, for the next year or so, or the next 8 months, 9 months, all train traffic between Germany on the west, on the east, and France on the west went through Strasbourg. All other means of communication, transportation were not there. We got into Germany. We went to Cologne. We saw the war, what it did. Cologne, there was not a building standing. Not a building. Once in a while you saw 2 sides of a building forming a corner, maybe halfway higher than the building might have been. Half the height of the building. We went to Cologne. We went to another city. And there were all kinds of rumors where we were going to be occupying. Germany, Austria, whatnot. And we must have bivouacked somewhere for a day or 2 or 3. I don't remember. I really don't. It's a haze. And we got back on our trains. Now, you know the trains we were on were called 40 and 8s. These were square boxcars, which were pre-World War I, and it took the name from the soldiers in World War I. That is 40 men or 8 horses. And that's...
Were those the same kind of cars that were used to transport Jews down to the concentration camps?
Maybe.
Was it the same kind of empty, just room for people to stand or...
Stand or lie down.
You sat. They probably were shut.
No, we had enough room to... When everybody lied down, there was no room to move.
Okay.
Of course, though, we could open the doors. And so we sat on the out with our legs sticking out. We got on our train, and we started moving. And we went back into France. Where were we going? In the army, nobody tells you, and rumors are rife. Of course, then, after a day or so, we parked in my famous cherry orchard. Should I tell a story of the cherry orchard?
I think you're going to tell the story of the cherry orchard one more time for posterity. But
we stopped.
But make it short, because I think we got 30 minutes on the Warsaw, 40 minutes on the Warsaw.
We stopped in the middle of a field of trees, and we stopped, and we stood there. Finally, somebody got off the train, walked around. Somebody else walked off the train, and then some more people. And then right there were trees with cherries, big, fat, red, big cherries. And we had what is called helmet liners. That is, these were plastic helmets, and on this you would put the metal helmet if when you went to fight. But we didn't have the metal helmet; we had the plastic helmet. And you went, and we took a few cherries. And you ran back to the train. And you went out again. And you went there. Finally, the train wasn't moving. We started filling things up. And we ate. And remember, we'd been overseas from November of 44. This was May of 45, 6 months, 7 months. And we hadn't had any fresh fruit. At least I hadn't had any fresh fruit. My group didn't have any fresh fruit. If anybody bought any fresh fruit anywhere, anywhere else in the battalion or the regiment, I had no idea. And we gorged ourselves. Finally, the train moved, and within a couple of hours, cherries do what they do, and the smell of the personal relationship with the cherries was enough to perfume the air for the next day or so. Finally, we got down to the south of France, and our division separated into 3 separate camps. I was in Camp Victorette. The other 2 is not important in names. It was somewhere not far from Marseille, 20, 30 miles. And our job was to send troops from Europe either to America or to Asia. That is the war. Don't forget the war. The war against Japan was still going on. This was not all right. We had tents, square tents that held 6 or 7 men each. We had our own personal tent, the cadre. We had a tent where the food was made. And our job, we got groups of Americans in, and we sent them out. Where were they going? We didn't know. Some went back to America because they finished they had enough. There was a point system that nobody went individuals. The group, their company, their battalion, their regiment went either to America or went to the Far East. On August 22nd, 1945.
You were in Marseille till then?
No, we were in Marseille. Sure, we were in Marseille till. Let me get to that. We were in Marseille on the 22nd of August.
That was your birthday.
I had my birthday. The German POWs, who were our servants, who were the cooks and the other things, made me a cake. Of course, I could get along with them because I could speak a little German. Not just from the Yiddish. I had studied German 2 years in high school. So I could get along with them. And they were PWs. They were human beings. I told them I was a Jew. They still made a cake for me. I guess they figured it was better they made a cake for a Jew than would make any remark. I didn't know about the camps. We didn't know. We knew Jews were oppressed. We knew about the Warsaw. I knew about the Warsaw Ghetto, but the extent of the Shoah.
Meaning you didn't get any information as to what went when they went into the camps.
Nothing.
The army. There was no news. Army.
There may have been. We never got papers. It was an army paper called the Stars and Stripes. Famous. It was in World War I, II, but we seldom got a copy. We were isolated from the world. Anyway. Eventually, the call came out for the football team, and we cut down. We finished with Rucker. We finished with Victorette. The war was over. The war was over in August. What was it? August? I forget the date.
6th.
Was it 6th where we dropped the bombs?
Yeah. Hiroshima.
And Victorette was closed. And the whole situation of sending people home became a point basis. I mentioned this in a previous thing that you got points for every month, a point for every overseas.
You want to hear the news?
And then this was basically. Then we go on to my football period, and I think we did that.
Okay.
It's a short review. There was nothing spectacular.
40 minutes. Of a short review.
Listen, you're talking about 9 months.
Oh, you wanted to film 9 months for this? Bye.
Oh, we hit America too, though. Didn't I hit this before this? America?
What?
My Army in America?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
That was part of the 40 minutes.
Mm-hmm. No, that's 40 minutes. You got 36 minutes.
My wife is taking some pictures, family pictures, and so all of a sudden it hit me that today, 57 years ago, exactly, 57 goddamn years ago. My God, it's obscene, Ted. It's obscene. I know where the years have gone, but I mean they. I feel young and chipper and whatnot all day long, and then I come home and I look in the mirror and I say, who's that old fart? I should stay at work. You're right. Today I stayed at work. It was what a crazy day. I usually have, my computer. I do 150 lines. A payment or a stamp. 180 lines is a good day. 200 lines is a fine day. I had 300 lines today. I don't know where they came from. I don't know. But I was thinking about Christmas, and I was thinking, you know what? I've had the whole Christmas season from Thanksgiving to now, and I haven't heard either Jingle Bells or White Christmas or Silent Night. No, yes, Silent Night I heard on television the other day. There was some sort of concert or something.
Go.
Today is August 29th, 2000.
Can I correct you? Today is not August 29th.
Oh, today is July 29th, 2003. My photographer is my extraordinary, wonderful, amazing wife, Ruth Keusch. She is also the electrician and the sound expert. My grandfather, who wrote his diary, gave us a marvelous background of our family, which my parents certainly did not give me. And just a few days ago, or maybe it's 2 weeks now, my grandson, Jonathan Pia, was bar mitzvahed on Masada, and they asked me to say a few words about the family, which I did. And now I'm going to tell a little bit about my father. I've known in my life 3 members of my family who were very smart, as smart almost as anybody I've ever met. Of course, my meeting of people has been limited, but my father, Mike Hopkins.
Why don't you have a name?
My father, Nathan Keusch.
What was his middle name?
I don't know. I don't think he had one.
Who was he named after?
He was named after his grandfather. Okay, well, yeah, that's what you're asking me for. Mike Hopkins and my uncle Dugje Keusch, David Keusch, Dorothy and Razel's father, my grandfather Avram's brother. These were 3 very bright people. My father finished gymnasia in Europe. In Austria, finished gymnasia that was almost equivalent at that time to a college degree. But it's not a question of what he learned officially. It was his knowledge and broad background. But to begin at the beginning, he was born in Zabeltov in 1891. Art and I always thought it was 1893 until this was corrected by the date in Grandfather Avram's diary. Among those who took care of him or wheeled him around the block, whatever they had in Zabeltov, was my Baba, my grandmother, my mother's mother, Frimme Hager. My father tells that when he was still young, 14, 15, 16, his greatest joy was listening in on speakers who came to Zabeltov, or maybe by that time they may have been in Stanislav. I don't know. Digression. My father and my mother, just like Ruth's father, were of the new generation of Jew. They did not talk about their family. Yichus was not part of their background. They were new individuals, and what they did was important. As a result, so much of what I don't know went to the grave with my father, went to the grave with my mother, went to the grave with my Tante Akka, who remembered more about Zabeltov than anybody else. My father, when he was in his middle teens, his greatest joy was listening to Zionist speakers who came, must have been to Stanislav. Zabeltov was small. And he could never understand my playing football and not being interested in politics. The first major crisis in his life, I believe, must have been when his mother, the Baba, our grandmother, Devora, no, it wasn't Devora. Devora was the Baba. Hodel, my grandfather's first wife, Hodel, died after giving birth to Uncle David, not Uncle Dugje in America, Uncle David in Israel, in about 1906. According to my mother, the stepmother, grandfather's second wife, was not particularly nice to Nathan. And somewhere about 1912, 1913, early 1914, he left Stanislav to went to Vienna, where he was a bank clerk.
Can I ask a question? What did Grandpa Bram write anything at all about Hodel, his first wife?
I don't remember.
We have to check.
We have to check it. I don't.
It's the first.
He wouldn't. Well, a Jew wouldn't write about his wife, except the fact that she was sick, and she died. I don't. I can't say. My grandfather, among other things, tells that in Stanislav, Nathan, my grandfather, my father, went to jail on political basis for some reason which was not clear, and that my grandfather approached my father's Haverim in Poilitzian to liberate him. And after a day, or maybe 2 days, my father got out of jail. At this time, I must tell you that my father was a political individual. As far as I know, throughout his life, he belonged to a political party. Somewhere in 1917, during the war, now what he did during the war except work for the bank, I don't know. Why he didn't go into the Austrian army, I don't know. Don't forget, it's all in Austria. Zabeltov was in Galicia, was part of Austria. Hungary. In 1917, Jabotinsky, yes, Vladimir Jabotinsky, the founder of Beitar, founder of the Herut party in Israel, called for the Jews to join a Jewish legion, which was set up by the British Army, and to go and help liberate Palestine. My father, being a Poilitzian, decided to go to America. Don't forget, this was before America went to war. America went to war in April of 1917. Therefore, this must have been not in 1917, maybe somewhere in 1916. I don't know. My father made his way to one of the ports in Belgium or Holland. He tells the story that when he had to cross the Austrian-German border or the German-Dutch border, how he changed his name because his name, Nathan, was generally accepted, apparently in that part of the world, as being a Jewish name. So he called himself Adam. And when he got to the border policeman said, and looked at his passport or whatever his documents were, and said, "Sind Sie wirklich Keusch?" In German, one of the meanings is Paula. One of the meanings is virtuous or being a virgin. And he asked my father, "Sind Sie wirklich Keusch? Are you really a virgin?" And my father laughed, and he went through, and he went from there to Argentina by boat. He worked on a boat to Argentina. What work? I don't know. From Argentina, he apparently did not spend too much time there. He went up to Canada and came into the United States. In the United States, in New York,
the family, Grandpa Avram's sister was not yet in Argentina.
Nobody, no.
There was no family at that point yet in Argentina.
No.
Because that was later.
No, that would all be after World War I. In New York, he of course joined the branch of Poilitzian. Branch number 3. This is where all the big names of Israel, the founding of Israel, were. There was Ben Gurion. There was Ben Tzvi. There was who was the one we saw in one of Labor not Labor Zionist, one of the left-wing parties. My father was Poilitzian. Zion Weinper, writing in his Yiddish book about, among other things, the Legion in Israel, says, Natan Keusch says we have to join the Legion because we have to fight for Yiddish. My father was a very strong Yiddishist. What is that? At that time, there was a internal struggle in the Zionist parties on what should be the language of the Jews in Palestine. Of course, we know that the Hebraist, Ben Gurion, and Ben Yehuda, and Ben Tzvi won. Hebrew became. And Yiddish was practically outlawed.
Okay.
Eventually, while in Palestine, my father tells some little stories. He didn't say very much about it.
How did he go? Who did he go with?
He went with the Jewish Legion. There were apparently 2 or 3 detachments. Ted Friedgood's father apparently went with the first detachment, and then after him came the battalion with my father. How did we find out about it? If you remember, Ruth, we went to
the museum in
where was it?
It was in Amkraut's.
Yeah, no, Beit, no, it wasn't Beit Gerut. Gdud.
Gdud Ivri.
I know.
Was
a museum where we entered my name and our family's name. We entered Art and his children as Nathan Keusch's relatives. But he tells a story that once he was in jail. He doesn't say why he went to jail. And what was jail was a palm tree. And who guarded him? One of the Chavirim. And he tells the story. The man looks at him and says, Keusch. But these people from Eastern and Middle Europe all called each other by their family names. Ben Gurion was never David or Dudu or anything like that. He was Ben Gurion. Ben Tzvi was never Yitzchak or Itzik or anything else. He was Ben Tzvi. Anyway, this guard, who my father, if he gave him a name I don't remember, says to him, Keusch, come, let me be in jail and you guard me.
That means he could go to sleep.
He could be cooler. He'd be in the shade. Another time my father tells a story. The officers of the British, of the Jewish Legion were British, not Jews. And one of the rules was they couldn't go into Jerusalem. Jerusalem was off limits. And my father goes to the officer and says, Sir, I want to visit my grandmother. Why visit? Because you could visit your relatives. And the officer questioned me, your grandmother? Yes, what's her name? And my father gets a pass to go to Jerusalem. Who was his grandmother? Rachel Imenu. She's all of our grandmothers, isn't she? Another time, he tells about a fight that one of the Jews from the Jewish Legion fought a British officer, a fighter, one of the British soldiers. And he tells about how the crowd yelled, Setz him in the kishkes! Setz him in the kishkes! Hit him in the guts! Hit him in the guts! My father knew my mother, and they apparently were both in Sneef 3 of the Polizei in New York, and they were engaged to be married before he went to Israel. He says, I asked him, I don't remember, why didn't he stay in Israel, in Palestine, of course that was Palestine. He says, I couldn't think of bringing a beautiful young woman to this Churban. Everything was destroyed here. Whatever the second Aliyah had or didn't have, most of them had left the country. The war had gone on by the time my father finished with 4 years, and the country was in terrible shape. So he went back to New York. Where he worked to begin with, I don't know. He married my mother in 1920. I, of course, was born 5 years later, and Art was born 2.5 years after that. Somewhere in the early 20s, my father, or in the 20s, my father opened a dry goods store in Brooklyn, where the Haredim are now, in Williamsburg. I was born in a hospital. We lived in Keep Street in Brooklyn. When we lived in Queens, along the Jamaica line, I once looked around, I found where Keep Street was, one of those little streets in there. This, of course, at that time was all Jewish, not Haredi, not religious, Jewish. He had a dry goods store, and apparently he was in partnership with Uncle Shmela, Benjamin Shmela, Tante Akka's husband. Somewhere in the early 30s, we moved to the Bronx. And my father opened a different dry goods store. Dry goods store was clothes that you wore, socks and pants and underwear and dresses, men's and women's clothes, ready to wear. not suits. This was on 3rd Avenue and 169th Street. I remember it to this day. We're right on the corner. And my first school was right across the street, PS 63. So I must have been in 2nd grade, and all of a sudden, my class, we hear the fire engines coming. Hooray, the fire! And everybody was ready to jump up and look at the fire engines. And the teacher looks out the window and says, it's only a store on fire. Whose store? My father's store. In 1934 or 1933, I was sent for 2 weeks to Camp Kinderland, and my father lost the store. And this took place while I was in camp. And when I came home, I remember I cried about it like I had lost my best puppy. The store was a place to play. I used to go there and I fixed the boxes, make sure that everything was exactly straight. And once or twice, I had the chutzpah to go across the street to the candy store to buy the Sunday news. Not to read. In the Sunday news were Lucky Bucks. And now my father was a Daily Worker reader. To read the Daily News was a chet.
The Daily Worker is, nobody's going to know 10 years from now or 20 years from now.
The Daily Worker was was the newspaper of the Communist Party of the United States, in English.
Just remember who you're talking to. You're talking to your grandchildren this material does not exist anymore.
He also read, of course, the Daily Freiheit, which was the Yiddish paper of the Communist Party of the United States.
Freiheit meaning freedom.
Freedom. Anyway, I snuck back into the store from across this candy store, and I remember I snuck the paper behind some boxes. If you can imagine, the store was maybe 15